Welcome in. It is Big Ten today. Great to have you on this Wednesday. We're presented by Old National Bank. Dave Refson and Anthony Herron wearing pink today.
Yes.
In honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month here in October. Big initiative at the network today, and proud to be a part of it.
No doubt, man. I think all of us have likely, I know you and I have both been touched by cancer, breast cancer specifically in our families. There's so many folks out there who have as well. So it's cool just to take this small opportunity to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Let's get into the football and let's get into our big story. We will start with Saturday's action. 2 games at noon. Penn State coming off its first loss, hosting Indiana. We have Maryland trying to clinch bowl eligibility. They'll be at Northwestern. Mid-afternoon window features the Gophers, fresh off a huge win, hosting MSU, and Purdue visiting Nebraska. And then in primetime, the unbeaten Bucks going to Camp Randall, battle of 2 first-place teams. Let's start there. Our theme today is what Anthony wants to see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I got my eyes.
Yeah.
Got my eyes trained on these matchups this weekend, Dave.
All right, so let's start with Ohio State. What do you want to see from the Buckeyes as they follow off their really impressive performance? Really 2 straight really impressive performances, but obviously the one against Penn State fresh in everyone's mind.
I've been enjoying watching kind of what I viewed as the evolution of Ryan Day as a head coach in the Big Ten, because when he first took the job and got, ran up the flagpole really quickly to become the head coach in Columbus, then there was a lot of assumption that the Urban Meyer to Ryan Day transition would be as smooth as ice. And in some ways it was, but there has been some up and down, especially on the defensive side of the football. And now in some ways we see it sort of turned on its head this season, and I'm seeing Ryan Day embrace that. And I believe he needs to continue leaning into that aspect of it, being a defensive-led football team and being comfortable with that, being okay with that. And I do feel like that's where we're seeing Ryan Day progress to. It's sort of been a couple of years working towards this moment for the Buckeyes, where even the rushing attack has been good but not stellar. The offensive line is still progressing throughout the year, but with multiple running backs being banged up for the Buckeyes, and a quarterback position that now solidified its starter is still not consistently explosive, but they're still young there. What's been as consistent as anything for the Buckeyes has been their defense, and I do believe that that's fine. And it's, I find it a little bit comical sometimes where Ryan Day almost seems like he's sort of apologizing for not winning by 50 points or not scoring 60 when they go out there. But having these dramatic wins, these hard-fought victories late, this is still an offense that, like, when they won the national championship back in 2002, this offense is leaps and bounds better than what they were doing that year.
Right. This has a trestle ball feel a little bit, although to your point, it is, I would argue, a better offense. And look, kind of you outlined it. I mean, they've got guys banged up. They're in a little bit of transition in the offensive line. They have a new starting quarterback. Like, there's a lot of things here which prevent you maybe from having a 43-point-a-game offense. Right. But to be able to back it up with one of the best defenses in the country, to figure out a way to win games and to win fairly convincingly. I mean, there wasn't much doubt in the fourth quarter who was going to win this game on Saturday. I also think it's going to be a really good test of the psychology of this team, right? I mean, this is a huge game. I mean, Wisconsin is really good. And as we know, we've seen Ohio State teams go to Camp Randall and lose in the not too distant past. But still, you're coming off a game that you had circled, really one of 2 games. You played really well, and now can you follow it up with that consistency? What about from Wisconsin's point of view? The Badgers got a great come-from-behind win over Illinois. I mean, you want to talk about an important fourth quarter. I think they went from, had they lost that game, they would have been in a massive hole in terms of trying to win the Big Ten West, because then you have Ohio State here looming, whereas now they're in first place. I mean, it's pretty amazing how much that fourth quarter meant. So what do you want to see from them coming off of that?
I wonder if it's unfortunate any time a player gets injured, and certainly losing your starting quarterback is never a good thing for a football team. But I almost feel like perhaps this is forcing Wisconsin's hand. And as well as Braelon played in a first career start, made some key plays, huge throws down the stretch to help lead them back into that game. But it does seem like Luke Fickell, Phil Longo are sort of recognizing that their best opportunity is through Braelon Allen, who's on the show today, and that offensive line, and recognizing that what felt like maybe a bit of a crisis of concept at points in the season for the Badgers, now just recognizing, our guy, as Luke Fickell termed him, our horse, is what gives our offense and frankly gives our defense the best opportunity for success game in and game out. And they are banged up in the backfield as well with no more Ches Malusi. But if there's any back in the Big Ten, if there's any back in the country that you know can carry a heavy load, Braelon Allen is that guy. Coming off a career high in carries, I don't see any evidence that they would be throttling back off of that and what they ask of him, what they task him with to be the guy. And we've seen this in Madison before, where the running back is this galvanizing force for every phase of that program. And in year one, I think it's okay. And I expect Luke Fickell and Phil Longo to recognize that and continue to go down that road.
That being said, man, Braden Locke was big when they needed him to be late in that game, and 2 touchdown passes in that game. Keep in mind, they'd thrown 3 touchdown passes as a team the entire season.
They haven't been targeting the offensive line enough. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, right, exactly. You got to run more tackle-eligible plays. Yeah. That's the way to accumulate those passing touchdowns. I know you want to touch on best-case scenarios for some of these teams, too. I imagine I know your best-case scenario for Ohio State, but I'll give you the floor to say it first.
To be able to not only qualify for a college football playoff, but win the national championship, that to me is what stands out for the Buckeyes. And recognizing they have a defense to do that, not just Ryan Day, but Buckeye fans as well, and feeling like that's okay, and the team feeling that support. It was a rocking horseshoe the other day. And I think for Buckeye fans, just seeing where their team is, that ceiling for Ohio State is no doubt there. And there can still be growth in the passing attack. And perhaps, I still think that not only the team goal and what that ceiling is for the team as a national championship, Heisman, I'm not counting Marvin Harrison Jr. out of the Heisman conversation, because that's not the last big stage that he will have to try to achieve the recognition for that individual award.
No, you think about that game Thanksgiving weekend. I mean, it's always for huge stakes when Michigan and Ohio State play, just because of the bragging rights part of it. There's a very good chance there'll be for who represents the Big Ten East, barring an upset of Penn State or someone else over Michigan in the interim. But you can start to make an argument now that both guys, both superstars, Marvin Harrison and J.J. McCarthy, may be playing for the possibility of winning the Heisman on that day as well. So best case scenario for Ohio State, you outlined it, winning the national championship, certainly making the CFP. They made it 3 of the 4 years under Ryan Day, which is remarkable. What about Wisconsin? What do you see as the best case for them?
I honestly feel more strongly now than I did about Wisconsin's possibilities of winning the West Division. Part of that, the results in Iowa City over the weekend, but then also this idea of leaning into who they are as a run game. And defensively, Illinois was able to move the ball on the Badgers in a way last week that Illinois hasn't moved the ball on a lot of opponents this season, but we did see them bow up late in game when they had to. I spoke to Mumajong Mehta this morning, their linebacking stud on the interior of Wisconsin's defense, and there is growth that's there. And they're a little bit banged up, and James Thompson, who is a defensive tackle, who's made a lot of plays in the backfield for them this season. With those guys on the interior and shoring up that run defense, some of the experience and the veteran presence they have on the back end, like Hunter Wohler, I do think this is a defense that will continue to grow under Mike Tressel's leadership as well.
It'll be interesting to see if they can make it back to Indy. Remember, they've missed 3 straight. That is the longest streak they've ever had of missing Big Ten championship games. Really speaks to what a great and consistent program it has been through the years. What about Penn State? What do you want to see from them? They're taking on Indiana. They get to go home. They're coming off this loss to Ohio State. It was certainly deflating. How does Penn State, in your mind, what do you want to see from them in terms of a response?
So everyone goes through self-scout, really throughout the season, but certainly over a bye week, you kind of look internally and figure out what suits you. And we're at this point in the season where the teams who really emerge in the month of November, a lot of it will be about the coaches. I think the non-conference slate where everyone's kind of figuring each other out, not only externally, but internally. Teams are figuring themselves out. We're at a point in the year now where James Franklin, where his coaching staff, they know who they are from a personnel perspective. And the questions about explosive plays, especially in the passing attack, they will continue to loom as Penn State continues to be at the bottom of the Big Ten in that regard. But that being said, they've got a championship caliber defense, and the run-pass ratio in that matchup with Ohio State this weekend, I don't believe suits their best opportunity for victory. It'd be nice if it did, and it gives you, a more spread out, more wide open look and the opportunity for chunk plays to put quick points on the board. That's just not who Penn State has been this season. I would love to see them, and it's not like the ground attack has been explosive either, but it's been good, it's been more than competent, and I do think playing complementary football, even if you know that maybe back-to-back run plays lead to a punt, but then put your punter on the field, end the drive with a kick, and see if you pin that opponent down. And that attacking defensive mentality can now create turnovers, takeaways from you as you play downhill at that opponent. So I think the run-pass balance, that ratio for the Nittany Lions is something I would like to see maybe skewed a little more towards the run than we've seen at points this season. Because Drew Aller's talented. We all recognize that. We've seen it. They know it internally. But what is this team prepared for at the moment? What gives them the best opportunity at overall success?
I'm with you 100%. And I just think back to those two successive plays against Ohio State where Nick Singleton had significant holes and had two straight first down runs, one of which was his longest run of the year. And then it felt like they went away from that. Indiana's last in the Big Ten in rushing defense. So, again, if you're going to establish some confidence, I think confidence is really big for them right now because it feels like it's waning just a little bit on the offensive side. Establish some confidence in that run game and see what you can do going forward here, which gets us to the best case scenario. What do you believe it is for Penn State?
I still think it's not national championship or bust, but that potential is definitely there. We know there's meat on the bone from a scheduling perspective where great opponents await them, especially in the month of November. And the formula to get there, I do believe, still exists as well. Maybe it would look more like traditional, what we view as traditional Penn State football. And I believe that's okay because of the way this defense can take the field and just take the heart from the opponent. That was a game Penn State nearly won on defense last weekend on the road in Columbus. James Franklin talked about it very accurately after the game. Two of the best teams, two of the best defenses in America were on the field that day. Leaning into that can certainly, in my opinion, still lead Penn State into the college football playoff, having a chance at a national championship. And part of the reason why is when you look around the country, maybe Washington, amongst the teams who are legitimately in the college football playoff conversation, Washington may be the lone squad that just has the overwhelming offensive firepower that you would say we have to be able to match that. Aside from the Huskies, I don't really see anyone else that I would say a defensive-led team wouldn't at least have a chance to win against. So that formula, if you really condense things offensively, can still have Penn State right there in the national championship.
I'm with you. Can you figure out a way to beat Michigan, to maybe forge some sort of three-way tie, or who knows how things go between Michigan and Ohio State, and maybe sneak your way into the Big Ten championship game, or even be in the playoff picture without making it to the Big Ten championship game, which we saw Ohio State do a season ago. I do want to ask you about Maryland. They are going to Northwestern. This is the first time we have seen Maryland play since that loss to Illinois. They had a bye week last week. They have not played well the last couple of times out. We know the situation with Northwestern, although they have certainly fought and played hard this year. This is a game you would figure Maryland should win. So what do you want to see from them on Saturday?
I've been paying a lot of attention to certain teams and their mental stamina this season. And I thought Maryland, probably for the first time this season, I think maybe showed some fissures in that aspect, some of the intangible with the way they took the field against the Illini. And to be fair, it was the best game Illinois had played this season up to that point. And also Maryland was extremely banged up in that game, really on each side of the ball with no Corey Dyches, multiple defensive backs and linebackers were out of the lineup. They had like 5 or 6 starters who weren't even able to play, let alone play well against the Illini. So there was a lot. They were kind of limping towards the bye week, and they tried to surge back in late, couldn't get that done. But for Michael Locksley, having his team recognize that this season is not lost. It's not only about those big fish, those big carrots that are out there with the top teams in the conference, in the division, in the country, but making sure they are as locked in and focused as possible when they take the field this weekend in Evanston against a Northwestern squad that's been a very competitive, more competitive team this season than many of us anticipated. So there's a lot to try and reclaim, I think, for the Terps coming off of a bye. We'll get a sense, I think, throughout the week here for how many of those lost starters who didn't play against Illinois will be back this week. It's sounding like some of those guys will return, and I wonder if we'll see that attack return for the Terps on each side of the ball as well.
Well, you should be able to attack on defense. They're third in the Big Ten in sacks. You talk about how competitive Northwestern's been, and they have been more so than we thought. If they could get the offensive line into some semblance of competitiveness, they could be even better. I mean, that is clearly the area that far and away is holding them back the most this year. So we'll see whether or not Maryland could take advantage of that deficiency. What do you see as the best case scenario for the Terps this year?
I mean, a 9-win season I think is most plausible, but to be able to pull off one of those upsets, it may still remain for them on the schedule against the top teams in this conference, whether that be Penn State or Michigan. I would say that potential is still there. I said earlier in the season, I felt like either Maryland or Rutgers would be able to take one of those squads down. Like, everybody's not going to go undefeated out of those three main teams in the East Division. And Maryland and Rutgers seem to me the teams, because of their defense more so than anything, that has an opportunity to take one of those squads down. So double-digit wins, I do believe, is still a ceiling that's attainable for the Terps.
And remember, we've talked about a lot, have never beaten a ranked conference foe as a Big Ten member. When you talk about taking the next step as a program, that would be a huge one for Mike Locksley and Maryland. The list of the Big Ten's leading rushers this season, as it so often is, headed by a Wisconsin Badger. Braelon Allen leading the way, just over 100 yards per game, including 145 in Saturday's comeback win over Illinois. No great surprise for a guy who's gone over 1,200 rushing yards each of the last two seasons. And Braelon Allen joins us now. He is today's big interview. Braelon, thanks a lot for stopping by. Let's talk first about the game you guys just won against Illinois. Take us inside a comeback like that. Take us on the sideline. Take us in the huddle. What are guys saying down 14 in the fourth quarter?
I think the biggest thing for us was, not flinching and, trusting the game plan that we had, trusting each other, just to go out there and execute. And, I wanted to make sure for myself that, regardless if we won or lost the game, I left everything on the field. And I think everybody felt the same way. So ultimately just playing hard until the very end is really what helped us win.
Well, Braden Locke was tremendous down the stretch. We'll talk about him in a moment. But obviously, you were great in that fourth quarter. You remained the centerpiece of this offense. And it's funny, I was thinking back to Big Ten Media Days in Indy, and I was asking you there a little bit about the air raid and what you thought when you first heard Phil Longo's coming on board and this program is going to run the air raid. So take us back to kind of that mindset as a running back when you hear that phrase.
Of course, at first it makes you raise an eyebrow. But when you really think about it, you really just realize that it gives you more space and more running lanes, to hopefully run through. And so far, Coach Longo told me, right off the bat, I was gonna be the centerpiece of the offense, and we weren't gonna shy away from running the football. So I knew that coming into the season. And I think so far, he's kept his word about that, and we've had a decent amount of success being able to run the football, but of course it's been more balanced, and overall it's been great for me, having to expand my game in different areas, more so in the passing game, in protection, also catching the ball as well. So overall, I think it's been good for me and this team as a whole.
Big picture, I know you guys have been through a lot here over the last calendar year or so, going from Paul Chryst to Jim Leonard and now to Luke Fickell's team. What are the biggest changes been here with Coach Fickell when you think about where you were a year ago and where you guys are now?
A lot has changed, like you said, and I gotta say probably just the overall culture of what we have here now. I think that's been a major turnaround, and not that anything was bad before, but I thought Coach Fick did a great job, and coming in here and establishing the culture that he wants this program to have right away. And a big thing for us was finish all off season. We put emphasis on finishing. Last year we were 1-4 in games that came down to the fourth quarter. So throughout all of our off-season workouts and preseason training and things like that, the emphasis was finish, and I think that has a huge part in the way that we've played so far this year. First three, maybe 4 games, we played much better in the second half than we did in the first half, and then I think we showed again, just the emphasis of finish this past week, in a comeback win. So that was his really main point of emphasis throughout the offseason in the culture that he wanted to establish. is being tough and being tough all the way through the game.
I mentioned this at the outset of the show. You're from the state of Wisconsin, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, so a big in-state recruit, although you were originally recruited to play defense. So how did it come about? I know you played running back, obviously, in high school as well, but how did it come about that the coaching staff, at that point, Paul Christ obviously decided, hey, this guy we recruited to play safety or maybe linebacker, he'd make a pretty good running back?
Yeah, we had my junior year, which ended up turning into my senior year because I reclassified up. That was during COVID, and our fall season got canceled, so we ended up playing in the spring. And that was really my first time, taking over as the running back for my team, and had a good season. I mean, we played 7 games, and I rushed for over 1,000 yards on just a little bit over like 70 carries, I think. Went undefeated and everything, and so I ended up sending my tape to the coaches here because at that time we were still undecided whether I was going to be playing safety or linebacker. And I mean, I was 6'2", 240, committed as a safety. So in my mind, I'm coming here to play linebacker more than likely. And so I sent them the tape, and there was a month between my last game in high school and when I got on campus. And we're kind of right in the middle of that time, right at like the 2-week mark before I got here. Coach Chris called me, told me he wanted me to play running back. And it's been history since then.
Yeah, I'd say it has worked out pretty well. You were talking about your hometown high school there in Fond du Lac. I know you're really involved with the Boys and Girls Club there, and a place that you went as a young person. What's your message to young people when you talk about kind of the journey that you've been through and what you want to instill in them?
Yeah, I as a young kid, like you mentioned, it was during that time, spending, after school at the Boys and Girls Club, just kind of hanging around friends and doing what kids do. But in the back of my mind, I always knew I was a little bit different in the way that, I was very committed in what I wanted to do. And obviously I wanted to play football at a very high level. And being from where I'm from, I hadn't seen many guys go to a big school to play. So I was kind of wondering if it was even possible. And I'm glad that I'm able to show kids from the area that it is possible. And it doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter what position you play. You can chase whatever goals that you have. So I'm glad that I can kind of shine a light on that. As somebody that didn't necessarily have that same kind of resource or a person to look at. So that's kind of the main thing for me. I just want to be able to show kids that whatever they want to do is possible.
A great message. I want to ask you about your teammate, Ches Malusi. When we came into this year, it felt like you guys were going to be one of the best 1-2 running back punches, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country. We know he is now out for the season, unfortunately, and he's had all kinds of injury issues here in recent years. What's kind of your relationship and your interaction with him as he struggles through this difficult time?
Yeah, he's, I gotta say, we're probably best friends, not just on the field, not just in the locker room, but off the field. And, it's very close. We pretty much do everything together. And so like you said, it's been tough just to see him, have to struggle with these injuries over and over again. It's been very unfortunate. And I think, this year he's handled it pretty well. From what I've seen, he was on the road with us in Illinois and everything, and we're still roommates and stuff. When we're going to games, and he's been very supportive of me and the team. Kind of being there, staying around the facility, and showing us that he's still here working. Trying to rehab and everything and get back. But yeah, like I said, just tough to see him have to go through all these injuries and everything, but he's been great for us. I can't wait to see him back on the field.
Injuries have been a huge part of the story with this team. Tanner Mordecai obviously out as well. We got our first really extended look, full game look at Braelon Locke, and I mentioned he really played well there down the stretch. Give people some insight into him and how some of the veterans and those who had been out there playing all year integrated him into this offense as quickly as he did.
Yeah, he did a great job kind of just stepping in and taking control. I think his poise was the main thing that stood out to me. You know, we had talked about before, and we were down 14 going into the fourth quarter, and you know, he stayed the same. You know, he didn't get super fired up, super, you know, rah-rah, but he was never down either. And like I said, I think we were all on the same page of, you know, no matter how this game goes, we don't want to leave anything out on the field. You know, we want to all give it our maximum effort and play till the end. And he did that too. He came out with some huge plays, you know, on the last drive. Probably one of the most perfect balls I've ever seen thrown to Skylar Bell down on like the 4-yard line, wherever it was. And just amazing to see, you know, him just step into the quarterback role and execute the way he did. And it's, you know, regardless of if Tanner comes back, which obviously everybody is hoping that he's able to, you know, if he is able to or if he's not, we're in great hands regardless.
Braelon, I want to leave you with this. You've got Ohio State coming up here on Saturday. This is probably not news to you, but they're really good on defense. What do you see as you look at the film and prepare for this one?
Very, very talented, of course, as they always are, and very disciplined, you know, never really out of position. So, you know, they're not going to give us anything. Everything that, you know, we want, we have to go take, you know, offensively, defensively, special teams wise. Like I said, very disciplined, and, you know, they're going to force us to play our best football. And, of course, that's the goal every single week. So that doesn't change. But, you know, we know the team that we're playing. We know we don't want to make them, you know, of course they're one of the best teams in the country, but they're beatable, and we don't want to make them anything that they're not. So just going out there and playing our absolute best is all we can do. You know, it'll be a good game. I'm excited for the atmosphere that'll be here in Madison, and you know, it'll be a good game.
Looking forward to watching it as well. Braelon Allen, continued success to you. Thanks for spending a few minutes and joining us here on Big Ten Today.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
Saturday, a football doubleheader kicks off with the Terps and Wildcats. Then it is Michigan State and Minnesota. Coverage begins with Big Ten Tailgate Saturday, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Back here with Anthony Herron, and all of a sudden this Minnesota team is very much in the West race after the win over Iowa, taking out a Michigan State team that, as we know, is really struggling. What do you want to see from the Gophers as they try to build on that win over the Hawks?
The main thing that stood out to me from Minnesota's perspective that didn't show up so much leading into that game in Iowa City was a run defense. We hadn't seen the Gophers' front seven hitting blocks and stymieing a quality rushing attack at any real point in the season up to that moment. And Iowa had been running the ball very well leading into that game. And you saw a defense that had been struggling and stopping the opposing run stymie the Iowa rushing attack over and over and over again, and try to have them, you know, sort of force Deacon Hill and the Iowa receivers into keeping them in the game. And the Hawkeyes, of course, weren't able to do that. That's got to be sustainable for Minnesota. And they came off a bye week. They had a plan together for the Hawkeyes. So now you're back into just sort of standard operating procedure with 1 week in between games. But to have especially young guys, you know, guys like Maverick Baranowski at linebacker, who's getting a lot of run this season, who played well against the Hawkeyes, he's got to. Devin Williams, they've got to, at that second level in the interior of Minnesota's defense, they got to put that film on, and Joe Rossi's got to show them. This is how we play run defense, where you scrape with urgency, where you trust your keys and react downhill to blockers and to backs once they declare themselves. That's got to be a consistent thing for the Gophers because, you know, most of the teams in the Big Ten West Division have a very similar approach to wanting to run the football and play defense and be complementary in a variety of phases. But if you can't stop the run, then it's very difficult to sustain that. And that's really been an Achilles heel for Minnesota throughout much of the season. up until last weekend in Iowa City. If that can become a consistent thing, that strain that's necessary, and it's difficult at times for young players to consistently strain and trust in the way mentally and physically that you have to be able to play the run well. If the Gophers are now over that hump, then they are 100% right in the thick of the West.
And I agree with you. I mean, I know it's easy to kind of mock Iowa's offense a little bit because it hasn't been great. But to your point, they had run the ball really well the previous two games with two different backs. And Minnesota completely shut those guys down. So let's give them credit for stopping what was appearing to be a pretty good rushing attack there. We were talking best case scenarios with some of these teams. Best case scenario with Minnesota is?
We haven't seen P.J. Fleck make the Big Ten championship game yet. We haven't seen the Gophers win the Big Ten West Division. That is on the table for them this season after that win. Now, you had a performance early in the season against Northwestern where a late fourth quarter, huge lead, 21-point margin in the fourth quarter, went away. And kind of this season is a microcosm of what we tend to see from Minnesota. There's that one disappointing performance, that one performance that maybe surprises some folks. Maybe both of those are out of the way for Minnesota, and now consistency is established. With the Big Ten championship game, the West Division title, that is back on the table for Minnesota.
I agree. And I mean, you look at the schedule, they still have to go to Ohio State, so that's not going to be a picnic. Right. But you've got wins against Minnesota, against Nebraska and Iowa, I should say. So you think about who you could end up tied with, and then you get Wisconsin at home. So it's just not unreasonable to think that they have a chance to beat all three of those teams, who they could end up if there's some sort of multi-team tie. Again, it's completely unpredictable at this point, but it's not unreasonable.
As it always is.
Yes,
but
it's not unreasonable to think that Minnesota could make it. And I agree with you. If they don't make it, they'll be ruining that fourth quarter in Evanston where they really did fall apart. And again, give Northwestern credit for taking advantage of it. How about Purdue and Nebraska? Let's start with the Huskers. They're now riding a 2-game winning streak. Have to be feeling better about themselves. What do you want to see from them against the Boilers?
Kent, protecting the football, I think with how Nebraska seems to have recognized they need to operate offensively, getting back to protecting the football, I don't think that should be too tough a task. But this is Matt Rhule's first season with this squad. He's still figuring some things out. You know, I talked about how this point in the year, we're not into November yet, but the coaching staff, especially the head coach, recognizing who they are is a huge key to which teams end up emerging, ascending at this point in the season. And Matt Rhule, recognizing his personnel, recognizing certainly what his quarterback is capable of, is going to matter a lot for Nebraska down the stretch because we've seen them consistent on defense and making sure that, yes, you're going to have to throw the football sometimes, but doing so in a controlled manner is where Nebraska, I think more easily than some teams who've struggled with protecting the football, can make sure that they are able to do that. And if they do, then the running game has been quality, above average in a number of games this season, and the defense has stymied the majority of their opponents. The approach they take at QB, I am curious about that. Heinrich Haarberg has been a winning quarterback for them. Is he, at this point, with the way they're operating offensively, I'm not ruling out seeing Jeff Sims again at some point this season now that he's reportedly healthy. So I do wonder what that will end up looking like moving forward.
That'd be interesting. I mean, look, turnovers remain an issue for them, as you said. They've had 5 in the last 2 games. They've managed to win both games.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of turnovers. We know Jeff Sims, that is his bugaboo. We saw it early in the year. Turnovers an issue with him as well. Best case scenario for the Huskers here. Do you see them as a team that can win the West, or do you think it's just about making a bowl game?
I do believe there's more of an uphill climb for Nebraska because there's just more unknown about the commodities that they have access to right now. Of course, Matt Rhule has been a successful coach at multiple stops before this, but his players, a lot of youth, certainly inexperienced, and just guys who haven't been through this before. So mathematically, they can certainly win the West. They do control their fate with the teams that remain on the Huskers' schedule. But even just making a bowl game for Matt Rhule, a program that just hasn't done that in so long, and certainly in his first season, I don't know necessarily that from the expectations of Nebraska fans that that's the best result for Matt Rhule. Because if he makes a bowl this year, they're going to be talking Big Ten championship next year in Lincoln. Because, perspective isn't always something that Nebraska fans put their life
No fans have great perspective.
That's fine. That's fair.
Everyone wants.
Their hopes are going to be sky high.
I get it, but I think making a bowl, first of all, you got Purdue and Michigan State your next 2 games. You'll probably be considered the favorite in both of those games. take care of business, make a bowl, and what is amazingly, I mentioned this yesterday, it still boggles my mind, the longest bowl drought in the Power Five belongs to Nebraska. It's crazy.
Shocking.
And then he can take some more steps forward next year. And quick thoughts on Purdue. Coming off a bye, didn't play well last time out against a really good team.
Right.
What do you want to see from them?
This is Ryan Walters' first bye week as a head coach, and I'm really curious how he ends up utilizing that, how he tries to hone in on the opponent for this week, and certainly on the defensive side for the Boilermakers, because now for him, having the big whistle and an opportunity to evaluate where his team is at, where that next opponent is at, for the Boilermakers to try and sort of reclaim the potential for a bowl berth here. I really think the potential is there for them to do that, but the bye week, how different does Purdue potentially look, or is it just about sort of tightening the screws on what they feel they're best at?
Bowl berth's going to be hard. They can only afford to lose one more game,
Right.
and on their schedule is a visit to Michigan. So I'm not totally writing them off. I'm just saying it would be a monumental upset. If they could go back and play a different non-conference schedule.
Well,
Yeah.
Jeff Brom, he loved playing a tough non-conference schedule,
That's
and then he left West Louth.
It is a challenging one. Sunday, catch an exhibition hoops doubleheader benefiting the Maui Strong Fund when Michigan State faces Tennessee, matchup of top 10 teams there. That is followed by number 25 Illinois against top-ranked Kansas. Bill Self making his return to Champaign. Coverage begins Sunday, 3:30 Eastern, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. How great is that going to be?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It really will. And just to kind of see everyone as we get into this next phase of the calendar, man, the conference schedule is going to be fun.
I'm coming in on a fall Sunday.
Okay.
To be in studio to watch that. That is how fired up I am about the hoops. Should be great. I'm fired up as well about the Impact 5 because Halloween falls next week, but after your next appearance.
Yes,
This is the closest we get to celebrating Halloween with you. I know it's a holiday that is near and dear to your heart, and so we are going with the most monstrous defenders in the Big Ten, and as always, we'll count them down Letterman style. So why don't you give us a start with number 5?
I mean, if Seacrest grew a beard, perhaps you would be willing to go Seacrest style with this, because Dave has grown a beard in his old age as well.
Awe-inspiring one.
The other Dave, yes, it is quite a beard. But usually I would be here in orange for this show, but since we're in pink today, I still want to keep the Halloween theme going with the most monstrous, most frightening players in the Big Ten. And starting at number 5, I think there's a defensive lineman, an interior defensive lineman from Michigan in Mason Graham, who has just been spectacular for them this season. And what's as scary about him as anything is his technique, because of the level of aggression that he can apply into blocks, a flat back and pad level, and knee benders are jawbreakers, and he's able to bend his knees to create leverage in a way that most young men of his size cannot, and he does it snap in and snap out. He's able to eat blocks and defeat blocks. So the film of Mason Graham is scary, and he's one of the main reasons that Michigan defense has been so stellar.
Does he get extra credit for playing with the club on his hand?
He does. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yes, because you do still need to be able to grapple on the interior of the line of scrimmage. To be able to do that, and he's only got one free hand, that Q-tip is no fun to play with when you're up front.
I guess I was implying, does he get extra credit for being scary? But you're saying it increases the level of difficulty.
It does.
Of
It makes
doing
his
what
job
he's doing.
that much
That's interesting.
more, yeah.
Let's get to number 4. Who are you going with there?
So Tommy Eichenberg is like a mad scientist as a linebacker because of the way that he can diagnose what the opponent is going to do. It's almost like he's reading the minds of the opposing offensive coordinator. He diagnoses it, he reacts downhill, he's back in pass coverage, and he's the one directing all the traffic at both the front and the back end of Ohio State's defense. He's a midseason All-American for a reason, because of the way that he's able to sort of see into the future what the opponent is going to throw at that Buckeye defense, and we've seen his growth on the field season over season, and the growth of that Buckeyes defense has grown in tandem with him.
How about this? He had 77 solo tackles last year. Ryan Shazier is the only Buckeye with more in the last 20 years. Wow. So you talk about all of the great linebackers they've had at Ohio State. That's a pretty impressive number. Where are you going with number 3?
I'm going to go to Iowa City for number 3 for a player who he's played throughout his career in Iowa. Sebastian Castro has been more of a special teams performer prior to this, has certainly gotten some run on defense, but he has been as surprising and an excellent defender, maybe in all of college football this year, and he's kind of a shapeshifter almost like a specter where he just haunts the minds of the opposing offenses because they have no idea where he'll line up. There are times where he looks like a defensive end. There are times where he looks like an outside backers. There are times where he looks like a safety or a corner, and he does all of those things at such a high level. And so that shape-shifting ability that he has in the Phil Parker defense, he allows them to keep similar personnel on the field regardless of what the offense throws at them. And so the opposing offense needs to know where he's at. And then on a fourth down, on occasion, if he's outweighed by 40 pounds by a big back, he will come up and rock their world. There's an attitude that he brings to that Hawkeye defense that's been so fun to watch.
I never had any doubt of your abilities, but the fact that you were able to work haunting into this, I think just speaks to just how dedicated you are to hitting a theme in your craft. What about number 2?
Well, I think the number 2 player really speaks to what Rutgers has been exceptional at this season because the Scarlet Knights, their run game has been great, and really their complementary approach as a team has been exceptional. But that defense, and especially the attack that defense has played with, has been led by Tyreen Powell. Now, unfortunately, it looks like he's going to miss some action coming up for that Joe Harris-Simiak defense. But, man, there are very few players in the Big Ten Conference that have been as haunting for their opponents, that have been as ghoulish in their approach as Tyreen Powell because of the way that he attacks the line of scrimmage. He plays that joker position on key downs and distances, roaming at the second level, back in pass coverage, rushing the quarterback, pass rush, twin stunts, games, you name it. They don't know where he's going to attack, but you do know at all times Tyreen Powell's been in attack mode.
I don't want to cheat you on time, so let's get right to number 1. Who do you got?
There is a freak in the middle of that Illini defense. We have seen it season over season. And Johnny Newton, as much as that very first game of the season, like, oh, is that the same Johnny Newton as last year? Maybe we weren't certain about it in the opener. And the Illini defense has struggled this season by comparison to expectations and the standard that they had set. But when you watch the film, man, there is a size, a girth to Johnny Newton while still being able to get skinny, to turn shoulders, to penetrate into gaps, and the energy that he plays with snap after snap for the Illini. He was almost single-handedly going to win that game for them last week against Wisconsin. He got disqualified from it, and everything turned. But there's not a scarier defender, a more frightening defender in the Big Ten than Johnny Newton.
Agree with you 100%. And that was total turning point of the game when he got ejected for targeting. It did appear to be a targeting.
Right, it was.
But, man, highest-rated player in the country by Pro Football Focus.
Unblockable.
He's really something. We will see you tomorrow. Jake Butt and Joel Klatt join us.